This is
Make It Plain.
Make It Plain.
MIP
With Masamela Matfumo.
Mark Thompson.
Make It Plain.
Get woke.
Ladies and gentlemen, we always discuss the monthly jobs report with our good friend, the chief economist, Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, centeronbudget.org, the one and only Chad Stone. Chad, how are you today, buddy?
I'm well, Mark. How are you?
Just fine. Always glad to have you with us. So 236,000 jobs was the number for March 2023, correct?
That's right. That's on the payroll side, the survey from employers of how many people do you have on your payrolls. And a reminder that the data come from two surveys. The household survey asks people how many people are working in the household, and the payroll survey asks employers how many jobs do you have. And we've had them moving in opposite directions in a few months in the past, but this month, the month of March, they moved together and they both were solid. So it was a pretty good jobs report.
What factors would you attribute to those two numbers, those two figures coming together and this jobs report being solid? Is there anything going on that's helping to make it solid?
Well, partly it's just the fact that these are samples, and the payroll survey looks at a much larger number of firms, a much larger number of firms than the household survey looks at the number of households. And so there's statistical noise. There's margin of error that's relatively wide in household survey, especially. And I don't think it has anything to do with the economy particularly. It has something to do with measurement.
Now, you do raise a concern in your thread, folks. We invite you to follow Chad at ChadCBPP on Twitter. You still are raising an alarm when it comes to, one, the banking crisis and any interest rate hikes. You're telling us to still be on guard for that, correct?
Yes. It's unknown what the Fed is going to be doing. I think they made a small quarter point increase in their target interest rate at their last meeting. That was in the wake of the banking crisis. But they haven't really signaled what's coming next. And things are going pretty well in the labor market, and inflation is coming down. So it would be, I think we would reduce our recession risks if the Fed were to take a pause, which they may do, but that's unknown. There's always stuff going on in the economy, and right now there's lots of stuff going on in the economy. But the labor market has stayed strong. There's just no question about that.
You also acknowledge, in terms of the Fed's role, that wage growth could be a factor as far as the Fed is concerned. Where are we with wage growth? I think you published it eased in March, with average hourly earnings over the last 3 months increasing at a 3.2% annual rate, down from 4.5% in January after revision. So help us understand again.
It's tricky business talking about wages, because we want wages to go up. We want real wages, the purchasing power of wages, the nominal wage change adjusted for inflation. And so the scenario we're looking for is for wage growth to slow and inflation to slow more, so that real wages, the purchasing power of an hour of work, goes up for the typical worker. But what the Fed is worried about is if wage growth stays higher than 4% for a while, that makes it very difficult for them to achieve their 2% inflation target, because they argue a 4% increase in wages that will feed into prices and keep inflation high. So we're seeing pretty good news on wage growth slowing and inflation slowing, which I hope will give the Fed pause on its rate hikes and allow the economy to settle in with real wage growth and no recession.
So just to be sure we understand this, the wage growth feeds into prices. So does that mean that as wages grow, producers will raise prices? Is that the way that works?
It can be if the demand is there for what producers are selling in a recession. That won't happen. But yeah, it's a tricky relationship. But if, as I said, the most important thing is to see wages slowing, but inflation slowing faster. And we're kind of getting there, it looks like.
Yeah.
There's still risks.
The unemployment rate itself is what it was in February 2020. We're at that level. So that's a good place to be.
Yeah, we've had 14 straight months where the unemployment rate is below 4%, and both the Fed and the Congressional Budget Office think that that 4% unemployment rate is the rate that is sustainable over the long run. But we're testing that. We've had it lower for a long time, and that's obviously good. We want real wages to grow, and we want everyone who wants a job to get a job. And there'll still be some unemployment because if you're moving from if you leave your job to look for a better job, you're temporarily unemployed. But if you find a better job, everybody's better off. And that's the kind of situation to be in, that the unemployment rate is reduced just to that frictional unemployment.
You're right about the change in unemployment rate. White from February to March, pretty much the same, 3.2. For African Americans, 5.7 to 5.0. Latinos, 5.3 to 4.6. Asian, 3.4 to 2.8. Everything near their pre-pandemic February 2020 rates. Here's this word again. You just said it a second ago. Should there be a recession, however, rates for Black and Hispanic workers could rise significantly. So wait a minute, Chad. Are you suggesting that there could be a chance for another recession? And if so, what would cause that?
Let me first say that something really notable about those job changes by race and ethnicity is that the Black unemployment rate is down to 5%, which is a full percentage point lower than it was back in the very strong pre-pandemic economy. And that the relationship of the Black rate being twice the white rate, that's narrowed. But as you say, if we go into a recession, who's first to lose their jobs? And what we always see in recessions is that the Black unemployment rate shoots up faster. So we want to hold on to those gains that we've achieved.
But that's good. But in terms of the recession, what are some of the things that could? I mean, we had a recession because of a pandemic. What else at this hour is out there that could cause another recession?
Well, we've had the last two recessions have been both real quite deep, and caused by unusual events. Pandemic, you don't get that every few years, and the great financial crisis, the global financial crisis, which precipitated the previous recession. Normally, it is Fed tightening that leads to a recession, and we're seeing Fed tightening, and so there's history's a guide, that raises the risk of recession. Now, lots of folks who are willing to predict the future think that there's a 50% probability of a recession in the next year. Goldman Sachs is as low as 35% probability of recession. That's still relatively high, but these are guesses.
And that's primarily because of what the Fed might do?
Yeah.
Okay. You also alluded to the banking crisis. How much of that is a factor in what we're seeing today in terms of numbers, wage growth, or the possibility of a recession?
Well, the banking crisis leads to, or could lead to, higher interest rates in the same way that Fed tightening on purpose leads to higher interest rates. And so it's another force. If loans become more expensive because banks are being more cautious, that hurts interest sensitive sectors. It hurts cars. It hurts construction. It hurts housing. In the same way that Fed rate hikes affect all of those interest sensitive components.
Yeah.
So that's where the risks lie.
Another favorite topic of ours, and there's not always good news on this topic. Where are we in terms of state, local, leisure, and hospitality? Those still aren't fully back to where they ought to be going to February 2020, right? And that's even this latest March 2023. They're still not where they ought to be, right?
That's right. I have to look at my cheat sheet. But yeah. So first, leisure and hospitality job creation in a month has been solid. And so the gap between the number of leisure and hospitality jobs now and the number of leisure and hospitality jobs that we had in February of 2020, just before the recession, that's shrinking, but it's still large.
Okay.
It's shrinking because monthly leisure and hospitality are doing better. And so we added, I think we're up well over, maybe it's something like 1.3 million jobs overall compared with where we were in February 2020. But leisure and hospitality and government and government spending, especially state and local, is still down substantially and is subtracting also for.
Shall we speculate that part of that is because, and we talked about this before, and I don't know that the term is accurate or fair, but for lack of a better one, the Great Resignation, are in some of these jobs. It's speculated that people didn't go back because they weren't making enough money to make it worth going back, including in the classroom. Because when we talk about state and local, that number heavily derived folks from education. So if people aren't making the kind of money they think they should be making in these fields, some of them is not worth going back. Is that what we can say a lot of this has to do with?
Actually, the latest data suggests that across age groups, labor force participation is close to where it was at the before the recession. In other words, that in that very high employment economy before the pandemic recession in February 2020, the labor force participation rate of the overall population is still down some, but that reflects demography more than economics. The fact that a larger proportion of the population is now in its retirement years because the baby boom generation is moved in, is almost all in and the following generation is starting to move in. So if we look at the 16 and over population, which is 16 years of age and older, which is what the headline statistics all are, there's some issues. But if we look at prime age, if we look at breakdowns by age group, lots of them are the evidence of a great resignation or of a permanent drop in labor force participation. They're all close to where they were prior to the pandemic, and that's because of some of the ongoing improvements in the labor market. So it's that narrative of the Great Resignation has, however true it might have been, it's losing some of its force as the job market continues to be on a roll.
Yeah. That's good. That's good news. All right, folks, as always, the latest on the jobs report. Follow his thread on Twitter, Chad CBPP, at Chad CBPP on Twitter. Chad Stone, Chief Economist, Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. Chad, appreciate you as always, buddy.
Always great to be on, Mark.
Thanks for getting woke and listening to Make It Plain. As always, perform an act of kindness on behalf of an elder or young person. Write a letter to a sister or brother who just so happens to find her or himself incarcerated. Offer libations to the ancestors upon whose sturdy shoulders we all now stand. And above all, give thanks to the God of your understanding by whatever name you call her and him. All God asks of us is that we give each other love. Thanks for giving MIP love. And please remember to subscribe and give us a 5-star rating. If all hearts and minds are clear, it has been made plain.